It was barely past 6 a.m. when the quiet of Cedar Hollow was broken, not by traffic or morning birds, but by the sudden stillness that fell over the old road near Maple Ridge. Harlan Ashland, a retired state trooper with a worn leather coat and a limp in his right leg, was walking alongside his old K-9 partner, Ruger. The morning mist hung low, curling around the frost-covered mailboxes like smoke. Harlan had walked this same route every morning for the past 6 years since his wife, Cecily, passed. Ruger had never once pulled the leash until now. Ruger stopped cold. His ears perked, his nose lifted, and then he darted toward the edge of the road, where an old silver Buick was parked awkwardly near a ditch. Harlan followed quickly, his chest tightening. The car was fogged on the inside. As he got closer, Ruger began to whine. Not bark, not growl, just a high-pitched whimper, as if he sensed something delicate inside. Harlan placed a hand on the trunk for balance and peered into the back seat. There she was, a baby, no more than 6 or 7 months old, wrapped in a thin floral blanket, cheeks flushed from the cold. Her eyes were wide open, staring straight into Ruger's. No car seat, no diaper bag, no adult in sight, just the hum of distant power lines and the creak of bare trees swaying in the early wind. Harlan's pulse pounded in his ears. Without thinking, he tried the back door. It opened with a groan. The cold air rushed in. He picked her up gently, instinctively checking for injuries. She was silent but breathing, her tiny chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. Ruger stood beside them, tail still, body alert. Harlan wrapped her tighter in the blanket and whispered, "You're safe now, little one." There was no note, no sign of a struggle, just abandonment pure and cold. Back at his truck, Harlan turned on the heater and placed the baby in the passenger seat. Ruger climbed into the back but leaned his head forward, resting his chin next to her arm. The connection between them was immediate, like a thread pulled tight by something unseen. Harlan dialed 911 with a trembling hand. "This is Harlan Ashland. I found an abandoned baby. Alive. She needs medical attention. We're off Maple Ridge, near Hollow Bend." As he waited for help, he glanced at Ruger, then at the baby, and felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not panic, something deeper, like a door slowly unlocking. He had no idea who she was, where she came from, or why she'd been left alone in the cold. But in that moment, one thing was clear. His quiet, empty life had just changed forever. The ambulance arrived faster than Harlan expected. Red and white lights flickered through the fog, cutting across the stillness like a blade. EMTs moved quickly, but gently, as Harlan handed them the baby. "She hasn't cried once," he said, his voice hoarse. "Not a sound." One of the medics, a woman named Calla, looked at the child's eyes and frowned. "She's alert, but there's a disconnect," she said quietly. "Almost like she's been waiting too long for someone to notice." Harlan stood by his truck, arms crossed, watching as Ruger remained seated, unmoving, eyes following the baby as she was lifted into the ambulance. There was something haunting in that moment. It wasn't just concern, it was a sense of duty rekindled. Ruger hadn't been on a real call in years, yet here he was, acting as if this baby was the most important discovery of his life. Harlan felt it too, the weight of it, the strangeness, the unspoken bond forming between them all. As the EMTs pulled away, a police cruiser rolled up behind Harlan's truck. Out stepped Sergeant Delia Rennick, a woman he hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Her uniform looked crisp, but her eyes were tired. "Ashland," she said, nodding once. "Didn't expect to hear your voice over dispatch again." Harlan offered a dry half-smile. "Didn't expect to make that kind of call." Delia's tone softened as she approached. "They said a baby? In an abandoned car." Harlan pointed toward the Buick. "Back seat. No note. No prints I could see. She was just there." Delia walked around the car slowly, scanning with trained eyes. Whoever left her didn't want to be found. No plates, no registration. Vince been scratched off. "This car's a ghost." She paused, then looked back at Harlan. "You named her yet?" He hesitated, Didn't seem right to call her nothing. He looked down at Ruger, then toward the road where the ambulance had disappeared. I called her Calla, like the flower, strong, but quiet. Delia wrote it down without a word. Back at the station later that afternoon, Harlan sat in the waiting area while Ruger rested at his feet. He hadn't planned on staying long, but Delia insisted he give a full statement. The warmth of the building clashed with the chill that still hung inside him. He couldn't stop seeing the baby's eyes. So open, so unreadable. There was something strange about it. Not fear, not even sadness. Just a quiet awareness, as if she knew more than she should. Delia stepped out of the back office with a folder in her hand. No missing persons matching her description. Nothing in the state system. She paused. Harlan. It's like she doesn't exist. He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. Then we better find out who tried to erase her. The next morning brought gray skies and a sharp wind that scraped through the pines surrounding Harlan's cabin. Ruger sat by the window, ears alert, as if waiting for something. Harlan stood over the kitchen sink, staring into his coffee like it might explain something. He hadn't slept much. His thoughts kept circling back to Calla, her silence, her stare, and the strange stillness about her that didn't match any child he'd ever seen. He had been in dozens of high-pressure cases, seen every kind of trauma. But this felt personal, and he didn't know why. A knock came at the door. Not hard, not urgent, just enough to raise the hair on the back of his neck. Ruger growled low in his throat. Harlan opened it to find Sergeant Delia Rennick again, this time without her uniform. She held a small manila envelope in one hand and a tired expression in the other. Didn't mean to drop by uninvited, she said. But something's not sitting right. Harlan stepped aside without a word, and Ruger moved to her cautiously, sniffing her coat before settling back near the door. Delia placed the envelope on the kitchen table. We ran a deep check, national, state, even foster databases. No record of a missing baby matching Calla's description. No medical records, no birth certificate, no hospital intake that lines up. It's like she was never born. Harlan's brow furrowed. That's not possible. Delia nodded slowly. Exactly. Which is why I came in person. She hesitated, then added, the car she was in? It's registered under a false name. The address listed is a storage unit out in Twin Lakes. Been paid in cash for over a year. Harlan leaned forward. So someone planned this. Delia nodded. Looks that way. And here's the part that really gets me. There was a faint trace of bleach in the trunk. Like someone cleaned it professionally. But they left the baby. Harlan clenched his jaw. They wanted the car to disappear. But something changed. Delia looked him in the eyes. You think it was intentional, leaving her like that? He didn't answer right away. Not sure. But it didn't feel like a mistake. They sat in silence for a moment, the wind outside pushing against the cabin walls. Ruger shifted his weight, resting his chin on Harlan's boot. Delia glanced at the old dog. He's still sharp. The way he spotted her. He's got instincts. Harlan nodded. He's seen more than most people I know. She pulled out another sheet of paper. Child Protective Services is moving fast. They'll be taking custody in 2 days unless something changes. Harlan's face tightened. That baby's not going to some system warehouse if I can help it. Delia looked at him for a long moment. You thinking of keeping her? Harlan didn't blink. I'm thinking she was left with me for a reason. Harlan sat alone that night, the fireplace crackling low as shadows danced across the wood-paneled walls of his cabin. The rocking chair creaked beneath him. Calla was asleep in the spare room, bundled tightly in blankets that had once belonged to his daughter, long before the accident that tore everything apart. He hadn't opened that room in years. But when he carried Calla in and saw the way her small hand curled around the edge of the old crib, something cracked in him. Not just memory, not just grief. Something deeper, like the faint sound of a door unlocking inside his soul. Ruger hadn't left the hallway all night. He lay stretched out between Harlan and the baby's room, eyes half closed but alert. There had always been something uncanny about Ruger's sense of danger. And tonight was no exception. At one point, he stood up and stared at the front door for several minutes. Ears high, nose twitching. Though no car passed, no owl cried, no wind howled. Harlan watched him carefully. "What is it, boy?" But Ruger didn't move. He just kept staring, as if something was already outside, watching. The next morning brought frost and silence. Harlan poured coffee and glanced at the phone. He hadn't called CPS. Not yet. Not because he didn't know what they'd say, but because he already did. They'd take her, place her in a temporary foster home, start paperwork, run a case like it was routine. But this wasn't routine. Nothing about Calla felt accidental. The fact that she was alive, healthy, and in his care didn't feel like fate. It felt like a message. He pulled out an old photo album from a chest in the living room. As the pages flipped, dust scattered into the air like memories breaking loose. Photos of Cecily, of their daughter Maisie, of Ruger as a young patrol dog. And then one photo stopped him cold. Cecily at a town event, standing beside a woman Harlan didn't recognize. The woman held a baby. Blonde. Blue eyes. There was no name written on the back. Just a date. June 14th, 1994. Harlan's fingers tightened on the edge of the photo. His mind started turning. Cecily had volunteered at a shelter downtown for years. She'd kept journals, boxes of them in the attic. He'd never touched them after she died. Could there be something in them? Something she never told him? Harlan stood, grabbed his keys and turned to Ruger. "Let's go digging." Ruger stood immediately, tail stiff, ears pointed. He was ready. They drove into town, past the place where the Buick had been found, past the corner store where everyone still recognized Harlan but rarely spoke to him. As they turned onto the road that led to the storage units Cecily once rented for her charity work, Harlan felt his stomach twist. There were things about Cecily he had never questioned. Maybe he should have. The storage unit sat between two rusted fences at the edge of town, half forgotten like everything else Cecily had touched in her final years. The lock was stiff, but the key still worked. Inside, the air was dry and still, filled with the faint scent of cedar and paper. Dust floated in the single shaft of light from a cracked ceiling vent. Harlan stepped inside, Ruger following at his heels, nose low, ears twitching. Old boxes lined the walls, some labeled with years, others with nothing at all. He opened the first box slowly. Inside were old community flyers, donation forms, and newsletters from the shelter Cecily had run. Nothing unusual. But the second box was different. Tucked between children's drawings and personal notes, he found a sealed manila folder with Cecily's handwriting. "Private, do not discard." Harlan hesitated. Cecily had always respected privacy, but something about this folder felt different. He opened it. Inside were copies of birth records, newspaper clippings, and photos, some dated over 20 years ago. One photo in particular made his heart seize. A baby girl wrapped in a pink blanket, nearly identical to Calla. Behind the photo was a letter. Cecily's handwriting was shaky, likely from her final months, but legible. "If something ever happens, and she's brought back, you'll know what to do. Her mother made a mistake, but that child didn't ask for any of this. Keep her safe, Harlan." He sat on the cold concrete floor, staring at the words. There it was, proof that Cecily knew. She'd known about the child. Maybe not Calla specifically, but someone. And Cecily had kept it from him all these years. Harlan felt heat rise behind his eyes. Not anger, but confusion, sorrow, and something close to betrayal. Why hadn't she told him? Why hide it? Ruger let out a low growl and turned toward the entrance. Harlan stood, eyes narrowing. A car door slammed outside. Not from his truck. Someone else was here. He stuffed the folder under his coat and stepped out of the unit. A dark blue sedan had just pulled into the gravel lot, its windows tinted. A man stepped out, mid-30s, clean-cut, too polished for this part of town. He didn't speak, just looked at Harlan, then at the unit, then back at Harlan again. "You lost?" Harlan asked, voice flat. The man didn't answer, just got back in the car and drove off slowly, tires crunching the gravel with deliberate slowness. Ruger barked once, loud and sharp, as if telling him to remember the sound. Harlan watched the car disappear down the road, heart pounding. Someone was watching, and whatever Cecily had tried to keep buried, it wasn't buried deep enough. It was just past sunset when Harlan heard the gravel crackling outside the cabin again. He stood from his chair, hand instinctively reaching for the shotgun he kept behind the door. Ruger was already on his feet, ears forward, body tense. But the energy felt different this time, less threatening, more uncertain. Harlan peeked through the front window. A woman stood at the gate, bundled in a long tan coat, her hands gripping the fence like she wasn't sure if she should enter. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from either wind or crying, or both. Harlan stepped out onto the porch. "Can I help you?" he called out, his voice firm but not aggressive. Ruger stood beside him, silent but watching. The woman took a slow step forward, then another. I think you found her," she said softly. "The baby. The one from the car." Harlan's heartbeat kicked into overdrive. He stepped down from the porch, meeting her halfway. Up close, she looked mid-30s, worn out, like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. There was something familiar in her face, something unspoken. "My name's Naomi," she said. "Naomi Calder." Harlan blinked. The name scratched at something in the back of his memory. She pulled out a folded paper from her coat and handed it to him. It was a photo, a younger Naomi, holding a newborn. The baby in the picture had the same eyes as Calla, same delicate mouth, same quiet focus. "I gave her up," Naomi said, barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to. I didn't have a choice. There were people who made sure of that." Her voice cracked. "But she wasn't supposed to disappear. She was supposed to be placed in a home, properly, legally. And then, it all went dark. I didn't even know she was alive until last week." Harlan's face tightened. "You need to explain." Naomi nodded slowly. 6 years ago, I signed temporary custody papers under pressure. Private agency. They said it was closed adoption, that it would be safe, that I wouldn't be allowed to contact her. But then I found out the agency didn't exist anymore. Their office was gone. Records vanished. The man who handled the transfer, Lowell Greaves, I don't even know if that's his real name. Harlan's blood ran cold. He remembered that name. Prosecutor. Retired. Tied to a corruption investigation that Cecily had tried to expose before her death. Inside the cabin, Calla began to cry. It was the first sound she'd made in days. Naomi froze, hands to her chest. Ruger turned and ran to the door, looking back at Harlan as if to say, "She knows." Harlan opened the door and looked at Naomi. "Come in," he said. "We have a lot to talk about." Outside, in the woods beyond the gate, a pair of headlights blinked off unseen. Naomi sat stiffly on the edge of the worn sofa, her eyes darting around the cabin like she was afraid someone might burst through the walls at any moment. Calla rested in her arms now, quiet again. Her small fingers curled against Naomi's chest. Ruger lay nearby, never taking his eyes off them. Harlan stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, face unreadable. He had been trying to piece together Cecily's letter, Naomi's story, and the files he found in the storage unit. But the pieces weren't clicking together fast enough. And now Lowell Greaves, was back in the picture. "I don't know where he is now," Naomi said, gently stroking Calla's hair. "Last time I saw him, I was 19. He wore a badge, said he was helping girls like me stay out of trouble. He promised protection, a chance to start over. I didn't know it was all a lie." Her voice trembled. "But Cecily, your wife, she found me. Years later. She tried to help. She warned me about him. Said he was connected to people doing terrible things. I think she was being watched too." Harlan's throat tightened. Cecily had been more than just a kind soul with a shelter. She had been digging into something that might have gotten her hurt, or worse. "She kept all of this from me," he muttered, mostly to himself. "Even the name Greaves. I never knew she was involved in any kind of investigation. Naomi looked up. She told me she didn't want to drag you back into it. Said you had already lost too much. Harlan turned away, eyes burning. She was right. Outside, the wind had picked up. Ruger's ears flicked toward the door again. Naomi noticed. He keeps doing that. Watching the door. Harlan nodded slowly. Because someone's out there. Or they were. He moved to the small desk in the corner and opened an old drawer. Inside was a beat-up flip phone, his emergency contact line from his police days. He dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "Ward Bricker," said the voice on the other end. "It's Ashland," Harlan said. "I need to talk. And I need to know if Greaves is alive." There was silence. Then, "You don't know." "Know what?" Harlan asked, suddenly cold. Ward's voice dropped. "He disappeared 3 years ago. Feds said he went off-grid. No one's seen him since." Back in the living room, Naomi's voice came soft but steady. "He's not gone. He's hiding. And if he knows I found her, he'll come back." Harlan looked at Ruger, then at the window. Out in the woods, that same dark sedan sat beneath the trees. Its engine off, its driver still. Watching. By dawn, Harlan had made up his mind. He wasn't going to wait for danger to come knocking. He was going to find it first. The cabin, once a place of retreat, now felt exposed. Naomi and Calla were still asleep in the back room, and Ruger hadn't budged from his spot near the front door. The dog hadn't slept much either. His ears twitched with every rustle of wind or distant branch snap. His first stop, Ward Bricker. The old man lived in a trailer 2 miles off the highway, surrounded by broken-down ATVs and rusted tools. Harlan found him hunched over a coffee mug, still in his thermal shirt and worn-out jeans. "Didn't expect you so early," Ward said, motioning him inside. "I heard your voice last night and knew something bad had crawled out of the dark." Harlan laid out the photo, the documents, and Cecily's letter on the table. Ward stared for a long time without speaking. Finally, he said, "Greaves wasn't just a lawyer. He ran a network, quiet under the radar. He brokered illegal adoptions, babies taken from vulnerable girls, funneled through fake agencies, and sold to families who didn't ask too many questions." He paused. Cecily came close to blowing it open, but she got spooked. Said someone followed her home one night. After that, she shut it down, burned some files. But looks like she kept the most dangerous parts. For you. Harlan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "And you didn't say anything back then?" "I tried," Ward said. "You were grieving. She made me swear to keep it quiet unless something like this happened." "Well, it's happening now," Harlan muttered. "And that girl in my house, Calla, she might be the last loose thread in all of it." When he returned to the cabin, the air felt different. He stepped inside and found Naomi by the window, clutching Calla tightly. "Someone was here," she whispered. "I don't know how, but I could feel it, like they were watching the house, breathing against the glass." Ruger stood tense, facing the back door, his body stiff like stone. Harlan moved quickly, checking the locks, the perimeter. No sign of forced entry, no footprints in the dirt. But something had changed. The silence wasn't peace anymore. It was pressure. He took one last look outside and saw it, on the fence post near the woods. A single white envelope. No name, no return address. Just one word written in shaky black ink. "Return." Harlan stared at it for a long moment, heart pounding. Whoever they were, they weren't going to ask twice. The envelope sat untouched on the table for nearly an hour. Naomi wouldn't go near it. Ruger wouldn't take his eyes off it. And Harlan, he just stared. The word "return" felt less like a request and more like a threat. He finally opened it with a pocket knife. Inside was a single typed message. "You've had your time. She doesn't belong to you." No signature. No instructions. But the tone was clear. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Harlan knew what had to be done. He couldn't wait for Greaves or whoever was working for him to strike. The only way to protect Calla was to expose the truth. And that meant dragging it all into the light. "I'm going to the sheriff," he told Naomi. "Not the station downtown. I know someone off the record, Bo Hemsley. Old-school lawman but clean. He might still listen to someone like me. Naomi clutched Calla tighter. And if they take her? Harlan shook his head. Not without a fight. He drove with Ruger in the passenger seat, the envelope and Cecily's folder in the glove box. The sheriff's outpost sat near the state line, far from the politics of the city precincts. Sheriff Hemsley, now in his early 70s, stepped out when he saw Harlan approach. "Didn't think I'd see your face again," he said, eyes narrowing. "Looks like troubles followed you home." Harlan didn't waste time. He handed over the documents and told him everything: Cecily's investigation, Naomi's forced adoption, Greaves's network, and now the threats. Hemsley read in silence, jaw clenching tighter with every page. "I remember Greaves. Too smooth, too clean. We all thought he was dirty, but nothing ever stuck." He looked up. This is a damn mess. If it's true, it goes deeper than adoption fraud. It's trafficking, cover-ups, obstruction." Harlan nodded. "And the girl they want back? She's not a piece of property. She's a person, a life. And if you don't help me, they'll make her disappear again." The sheriff took a breath, then pulled a battered cell phone from his desk. "I'm calling a federal contact. Quiet. Someone I trust." Harlan felt a flicker of hope, but it vanished when Ruger stood up, growling low, ears pinned back. The door behind them creaked. A shadow passed the frosted glass. "Someone followed you," Hemsley whispered. "Get to the back office. Now." Harlan grabbed the folder and ran, Ruger at his heels. Through the back hallway, they reached the exit, but before they could step out, a gunshot cracked the air. Glass exploded. Calla's life wasn't the only one on the line now. Naomi's words echoed in Harlan's mind. "If he knows I found her, he'll come back." He had come back, and this time he wasn't alone. The second shot shattered the window above the sheriff's desk. Harlan dropped low, pulling Ruger with him, while Sheriff Hemsley reached for his rifle behind the cabinet. Sirens had already been triggered silently. Bo's way of calling backup without tipping anyone off. Harlan's grip tightened around Cecily's folder. If they lost it now, everything would disappear with it. Calla's identity, Naomi's story, Cecily's sacrifice. All of it gone. They crawled to the back office, where Naomi huddled with Calla behind an overturned filing cabinet. Ruger positioned himself in front of them, eyes fierce, body still. Harlan touched Naomi's shoulder. "We need to move. When Hemsley gives the signal, we go out the side door, through the alley and straight to the car. You drive. I'll cover." Naomi nodded, tears in her eyes, holding Calla like a lifeline. "They won't take her again," she whispered. "Not this time." Outside, tires screeched, someone fleeing. Sheriff Hemsley returned, breathless. "They're pulling back. Either they know backup's coming or they already got what they wanted." Harlan checked the folder. Still there. "No, they didn't." He stood, jaw tight. "I'm ending this. Tonight." The sheriff gave a slow nod. "I'll stall the paperwork. You've got 24 hours. But after that, the system takes over." Harlan understood. One day to bury the past the right way, or risk losing her to the same machine that failed Naomi. Back at the cabin, the silence felt heavier. Harlan placed the folder on the kitchen table and stared at it. Naomi stood nearby, rocking Calla gently. "What now?" she asked. Harlan looked down at the girl's tiny hand clutching Naomi's shirt. "We make her visible. No more secrets. No more shadows." The next morning, he drove to the federal office in the city with Naomi and Calla. He gave the agent everything: documents, photos, Cecily's letters, Naomi's testimony. He told the truth, even the parts that hurt. It wasn't easy. Investigations would be long. Names would be protected. Greaves was still out there, but now with eyes on him. And most importantly, Calla, Iris Breyer called her real name, was no longer just a ghost in the system. Harlan filed for emergency guardianship while Naomi began the process of reclaiming her parental rights. They didn't know what the future looked like, but for the first time, they had one. That night, back on the porch, Harlan sat with Ruger by his side, watching the last light fade behind the trees. Naomi and Calla were inside, asleep in a home that had once felt lifeless. The cabin was different now, alive again. He reached down and scratched Ruger's ear. "We did good, boy." Ruger gave a soft huff and rested his head on Harlan's boot. The past had come knocking, and Harlan had opened the door, not to let it in but to finally let it go.